American Morning, the most news in the morning, period. Weekdays 6 Eastern.
We may not see some official numbers. We may not see the books. We may not see the government there in Iran release all the numbers. But is it so unthinkable that maybe the majority of people who did go to the polls on Friday did in fact prefer Ahmadinejad?
It's going to be hard for us to tell, and I'm not sure that we'll ever know the exact answer. But I think the decision by the Supreme Leader to get out and urge the Council of Guardians to look into this discrepancies or the possibility of discrepancies is a clear signal that the regime is worried about the unrest on the streets and wants to make sure that that this issue is addressed. Now, whether we'll ever get to the truth is still a question. The head of the Guardian Council has come out before the election and endorsed Ahmadinejad, so he has his own bias.
So is it possible there, it's hard to get into the Ayatollah, the Supreme Leader's head there necessarily, but is it possible that this is just for show, to try to calm down some of the uproar there right now?
That's certainly a possibility. This is the most significant unrest since the 1979 revolution, and many of the protest chants are actually echoed from the 1979 revolution. And this, I'm sure, is making the regime very nervous.
And we saw the Vice President, Joe Biden, come out and say there are doubts. So the U.S. government, the administration has some doubts about what was going on there and whether or not this was a legitimate election. Is that all the U.S. can say right now? And also, is that enough given what is still going on there?
The Obama administration probably needs to let this play out inside Iran before it takes a final stand, but it clearly is an awkward moment. It calculated that Ahmadinejad might indeed win the election, but it didn't calculate that the election might be so disputed and that it might lead to such protests. And it will be much more difficult for the administration to reach out and try to deal with this regime if the election is widely seen inside Iran as well as in the outside world as potentially not legitimate.
Now, and the administration couldn't come out before the election. You can't dabble in an election in another country, but behind the scenes, probably maybe, wanted to deal with somebody besides Ahmadinejad. But even if there was someone else there, how much of a difference would that make? Maybe that person wouldn't be so hardline. I mean, Mousavi we're talking about here, I guess, but maybe he wouldn't be so hardline. Maybe he wouldn't make such inflammatory statements. But at the same time, the president over in Iran is not the one actually pulling all the strings.
Well, this president is a particularly strong individual, and he has brought many of his own people into the government in important positions. But it is true that the regime would probably take the same position, whoever is president, when it comes to the most pivotal issue of Iran's nuclear program, that there was probably little room for compromise. The difference might be in the tone, the atmospherics, the professional level of the diplomats involved, and the kind of engagement that might have been more congenial. But it's clear that the challenge is just the same, whoever sits down at the table with the United States.
And last thing here, we had a guest on earlier that suggested that Barack Obama in some way kind of laid the groundwork for what we're seeing in Iran right now. Not necessarily reminding or telling the people there in Iran the kind of government they should have, but he kind of made clear for them in some of the policies, his reform might, even his campaign, just showing them that, hey, the U.S. is not the problem. Your own government is the problem. You agree with that?
I think the Obama factor was subtly in the background of the Iranian election, whether it was the campaigning by one of the opposition candidates' wives, the themes of change, and yes, we can. But did U.S. policy have any impact? No. The fact is, this is a drama that's played out inside Iran and reflects the dynamics and the quest for change, particularly among the young.